All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on IELTS speaking prep today. 7 days to band 9. Ambitious. Yeah, maybe a little. Impossible. Definitely not. We've got a whole pile of sources here, all about getting you to that top score.
And, it's interesting. So much prep material just kind of throws a bunch of tips at you. But what we're doing here in this deep dive is tailoring it specifically for you.
Right, because who wants to practice the wrong things?
Exactly. So day one is crucial. And this is all about figuring out where you're at. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
Right. No point in just kind of, practicing bad habits.
Exactly.
So the plan, it recommends like a full mock speaking test, like all 3 parts.
Yep.
And then really honestly analyzing that recording. It even mentions using those official band descriptors, fluency, vocabulary, grammar, all that. Why is that so important? Like right off the bat on day 1.
I think it's like a roadmap. It's like, let's say you just absolutely nail those part 1 short answers, but then, in part 2, your vocabulary is kind of letting you down. Now you know exactly where to focus for the rest of the week.
Makes total sense. No more just, shooting in the dark.
Exactly.
Okay, so then day 2 tackles those part 1 short answers. Kind of that first impression zone, right?
Yeah.
And the source material mentions this R formula, which kind of sounds a bit like, something out of a cheesy self-help book. But maybe there's something to it.
Oh, definitely. The R formula, so answer, reason, example, it's not just about structure. It's about hitting those IELTS scoring points. Giving a reason shows off your vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the example shows, that you can connect ideas, which helps with fluency.
So it's kind of like a sneaky way to tick those boxes without, sounding like a robot.
Exactly, yeah.
Give me an example. Let's say the examiner asks, do you enjoy museums?
Right, so instead of just a flat yes, you could say something like, yes, I find museums fascinating because they offer a glimpse into different cultures. For instance, I recently visited a museum showcasing ancient Egyptian artifacts, and it completely changed my perspective on their civilization.
See, that's way more impressive than just being like, yeah, museums are cool.
Exactly.
Okay, day 3 is, the dreaded cue card. Part 2, this is where I would personally just freeze up, I think. The source, it recommends this PPF method, which is past, present, future. What's the thinking there?
Well, I think it's all about guiding your story, keeping you on track, and making sure that you hit those key points that they're looking for. So let's say the cue card is, describe a childhood memory. You could start with, a specific event from your past, then, link it to how that memory influences you in the present, and then, even project into the future, like, how you might share similar experiences with your own children or something like that.
That's actually really smart. It's like giving yourself like a little mental map so you don't just get, lost rambling about random stuff.
Exactly.
The source also throws in this band 9 hack, which is using sensory details. That sounds a bit gimmicky.
Not at all. Think about it. Instead of saying, it was a beautiful day, you could say, the sun warmed my skin and the laughter of children playing in the park filled the air.
Okay.
It just, you bring your story to life for the examiner.
Okay, yeah, I see your point. It's more about painting a picture, I guess,
Right.
Not just listing facts. All right, day 4, we're moving into part 3.
Yeah.
That 2-way discussion part. And I imagine that's where they really start to kind of dig into your opinions.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
They're looking for, critical thinking here. Can you analyze an issue? Can you present different perspectives? Can you support your opinions? That's where the IDEAL technique comes in.
IDEAL. Another acronym. Okay, hit me.
It stands for introduce, develop, explore, agree or disagree, and then link.
Okay.
It's a framework for making sure you're hitting, all the points they want.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Imagine the examiner asks, something like, what's the impact of technology on education? How would you use IDEAL to structure that answer?
Right. So you could start by introducing your stance. Like, in my view, technology has revolutionized education. Then you develop that point with an example, maybe, discussing online learning platforms. Exploring involves acknowledging, alternative viewpoints. Perhaps the concern that technology can be distracting. Then you agree or disagree, and then finally you link back to the broader context,
So it's like a mental checklist to make sure your response is well-rounded and doesn't just sound like you're, rambling your own opinions.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, day 5, Fluency Boot Camp. Now we're talking. Do I need to start, jogging in place while I'm conjugating verbs or something?
Maybe save the jogging for later.
Yeah.
But seriously, This is about tackling those filler words.
Mm.
You know, the ums, the ahs, the likes that kind of creep in when we're nervous.
Yeah.
The source, it recommends shadowing, basically. So listening and repeating.
Okay.
Yeah, after high-scoring answers to get that smooth, natural flow.
So basically stealing the fluency secrets
Exactly.
of Band 9 superstars.
Exactly.
I'm all for that. Any other tips for day 5? I feel like, personally, my pronunciation could use a little bit of work.
Well, the source mentions this app. It's called IELTS Speak.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it analyzes your pronunciation, gives
Yeah.
you feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also this simple trick they recommend, which is speaking in chunks.
Chunks, like I'm suddenly like a pirate or something.
Not quite,
Yeah.
but it's about grouping words together naturally.
Mm.
So, for instance, instead of, I am going to the store, you say, I'm going to the store in one smooth phrase.
Ah, so it's more about flowing like a river,
Exactly.
not stuttering like a broken record. Makes sense. Okay. We've covered a lot here. We've got day 1 diagnostics. We've got RE for part 1, PPF for those cue cards. It's like, we're building this whole Band 9 arsenal, ready to take on days 6 and 7.
Absolutely. Let's get you feeling super confident.
Love it. See you in part 2.
See you there.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So we've got our day 1 diagnostic, right? We've got that RE formula for part 1, the PPF for cue cards. It's like we're building this like Band 9 arsenal here.
And like any good, training montage, consistency is key.
Yeah.
The source material really emphasizes this. It's not about cramming. It's about steady practice.
Right, little by little.
Exactly. They actually recommend, 2 to 3 hours a day.
Which honestly, that sounds doable, even with, a busy schedule. But just reading through this plan, it's not enough, is it? Like, what are some ways to, actually practice these things?
Right. So, imagine you're struggling with fluency, for example. Instead of just reading of shadowing, actually find a Band 9 YouTube video and try it. Like mimic their pace, their intonation. It's more fun than it sounds, I promise.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself like morphing into this like fluent English speaker, like some kind of language superhero.
Exactly.
I like that. But what about vocabulary? The source mentions like using, high scoring phrases and stuff, but I don't want to sound like I'm, forcing them in.
Right. And that's why day 6 is all about natural incorporation. So instead of just memorizing a list of like fancy words, think about concepts you might need to express. So let's say you want to talk about something that has like both positive and negative aspects. Instead of saying good and bad, you could use the idiom a double-edged sword.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
It sounds way more sophisticated. But how do I know like which idioms to use and when, I don't want to sound like I'm trying too hard.
It's all about context. Think about, your everyday conversations. Do you ever say things like, it's a piece of cake or it's raining cats and dogs?
Yeah, of course.
Those are idioms. So start paying attention to the idioms that you already use and then, try to expand from there.
So it's like finding that sweet spot between sounding impressive and sounding natural. I can dig that. All right, day 7 is looming, like the actual test.
Yeah.
Any last minute advice from, our source material here?
Well, they highlight pacing is really crucial. You have limited time for each part. So it's about, being concise, but also making sure you're giving yourself enough time to develop those answers. Don't rush, but also don't, go down rabbit holes.
Right. No one wants to hear about like my pet hamster when they ask me about climate change. But speaking of like panicking, what if I just like completely blank on a question?
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
Oh, okay.
It's much better to, take a moment to understand the question than to give a brilliant answer to the wrong question.
That's actually really reassuring. What about, what about mistakes? I'm bound to like slip up at some point.
Of course, yeah. Even native speakers make mistakes. The key is to not let it derail you. So if you catch a grammar error, for example, quickly self-correct, don't dwell on it.
Yeah.
Fluency and coherence are just as important as accuracy.
So it's like showing resilience, like linguistic ninja. I like that. The source material also mentioned something about like connecting with the examiner on like a human level.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's easy to forget that there's a person sitting across from you, not just a scoring machine. Things like making eye contact, smiling genuinely, these can really make you more relatable.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to feel like I was like interrogating a robot, but how do I bring that human element into my answers? Like especially on, those cue cards.
This is where storytelling comes in.
Mm.
The source material really emphasizes that, humans were wired to connect through stories. So, instead of just listing facts about a memorable trip, for example, try to paint a picture, evoke emotions, make the examiner feel like they were right there with you.
So it's like I'm the director of a one-person show and the examiner's my captive audience. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to win an Oscar for my IELTS performance, but I get the idea. It's about bringing my personality into the room.
Exactly. And that actually leads perfectly into our final part, where we talk about confidence and how to truly own that exam room. Because you've got the skills, you've put in the work. Now it's about showing them what you're made of.
Bring on part 3. Let's do this.
Okay.
Final round. We prepped, we practiced, we've even got our storytelling skills, honed. Now it's showtime. But walking into that exam room, that can be nerve-wracking. So how do we project that I got this confidence, even if, our insides are doing the jitterbug?
Yeah. Well, think of it this way. The examiner's looking for cues that you're comfortable with the language. And those cues aren't just about, vocabulary and grammar.
Right. It's like that it factor, that je ne sais quoi of, confident English speakers. But can you really fake it till you make it with something like confidence?
Oh, absolutely. It's about nonverbal signals.
Mm.
Our source material talks about posture. Sit up straight like you're genuinely interested. Sounds simple, but it really does make a difference.
It's like that, power pose thing. Stand like a superhero, feel like a superhero, ace the IELTS like a superhero. But what about those nerves? My mind tends to go into overdrive before, a big test.
Deep breaths.
Yeah.
Deep breaths. The source material talks about that too. Controlled breathing to calm those pre-test jitters. It's like sending a signal to your body that, everything's cool. You got this.
Okay. Deep breaths. Check. But what about when those, negative thoughts start to creep in? I'm going to forget everything, or my English sounds terrible.
Time for a pep talk. A mental pep talk. Replace those doubts with affirmations. So instead of, I'm going to mess up, it's, I've prepared well, and I'm going to showcase my best self.
Fake it till you make it, part 2. But, seriously, that mental shift can make a huge difference. It's about focusing on what you can control, not what you can't.
Exactly. And remember, the examiner is not your adversary. They're there to facilitate your performance, not to, judge you harshly. They want to see you succeed.
Okay, I'm starting to feel way more zen about this whole thing. So we've got our posture, we've got our breathing, we've got our positive self-talk. Anything else we need in our, confidence toolkit?
Eye contact. I know it can feel a little intense, but making eye contact with the examiner shows engagement, confidence. It's like you're saying, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm ready.
It's like when you're telling a joke and you make eye contact with someone and they're totally getting it. It just boosts your confidence. But what if full-on eye contact is a bit much?
Even just, key moments when you're introducing a new point, emphasizing something, meet their gaze, shows you're not afraid to connect.
Subtle, but powerful. Okay, we covered a lot of ground here today, from day-by-day prep to those confidence boosters. Any final words of wisdom for our listener before they, walk into that exam room?
Remember, the examiner is human too. They're not looking for a robot, reciting memorized answers. They're looking for someone who can communicate, tell a story, connect.
Yeah.
So relax, be yourself. Let your personality shine.
And remember, Band 9, it's not about perfection. It's about showcasing the best version of you. You've got this. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.